top 5 TV dads of Generation X. Next on another episode of Some Cereal for Dinner podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to Some Cereal for Dinner podcast. I'm your host, DNC. I'm glad you could be joining us today for another exciting episode talking about growing up, Generation X, what was on TV, the music, the fashion, everything related to the subject of nostalgia regarding Generation X. And today we're going to be talking about the top 5, or at least my top 5 favorite TV dads of Generation X as a follow-up of our previous video, top 5 moms of Generation X. But before we get to that video, I just would really like to encourage you to subscribe. If you're watching this video, I want to thank you for watching already. But if you're watching this video and you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. Please hit that bell notification as well. Please share it on your favorite social media. It's a small step for you, and it certainly means a lot for us on the channel here. And if you want to go that one extra step and support this channel financially, you'll find in the description box below a link to our Buy Me a Coffee page, which is like an alternative to Patreon. I will eventually get a Patreon page as well, but for right now, the Buy Me a Coffee page is what we have if you want to see upgrades to what we're doing here on the channel. And we are committed to bringing you the best of nostalgia and video content regarding nostalgia of Generation X. And as you can already see, I'm making improvements here on my studio, and so every little bit helps. I want to thank you for that. So now let's talk about the top 5 TV dads of Generation X. Coming in at number 5 is Philip Drummond, or Mr. Drummond, played by Conrad Bain on Different Strokes. Different Strokes ran from 1978 to 1986, and what was interesting about the show is that it actually jumped television platforms. It was on NBC, and then it was on ABC for its final year before it was finally canceled. I really appreciated Mr. Drummond because he took in 2 orphan boys, and there was a lot of issues during Generation X around social issues, around blended families, and also around racism, and this show seemed to tackle both of them. And he acted like a father to 2 boys who were not his own, and to some degree he acted like a father to me as well, because I grew up, as you know, devotees of this program will know, I grew up somewhat without a father, and so to see him interact with 2 boys that weren't his sons and to mentor them as a father was just heartwarming for me. Of course, he did have his own daughter as well on the television show, but it didn't stop him at all for loving these 2 boys like they were, and raising them like they were his own children. And again, those issues of racism and issues of blended families were at the top and forefront of people's minds during that time, and this show tackled both of them. And for that, Mr. Drummond, or Philip Drummond, gets our 5th position. Coming in at number 4 is Al Bundy, played by Ed O'Neill on Married with Children. Married with Children ran on Fox from 1987 to 1997. And you can't even think of a Generation X show without thinking of Married with Children. Now, I know that there might be people out there who might misunderstand why this is on the list, because a lot of people out there might be thinking, well, I could imagine a father like this, or I could imagine myself in a family like this, and I don't want to be in the Bundys. That's the kind of family I wouldn't want to be in. So why is it on the list? Well, it's not really necessarily about imagining myself in that type of family or wanting that type of family. It was really more about relatability. And for all its excesses that were for sure on Married with Children, there was a kernel of truth that was totally relatable to people of my age and of my generation. It was relatable on many different levels, again, given that the excesses taken into account. But Al Bundy was a father that I know that I personally didn't have, but I know a lot of friends who had a father like Al Bundy who just came in and wanted to be left alone. He had a job that he felt was a little bit dead end, but nevertheless, he stuck up for his own family. So even though there's a lot of sarcasm and a lot of extremes, and they weren't necessarily nice to each other, like I said about Peg Bundy in the previous episode, Al Bundy deserves to be on this list because he stuck up for his family when it counted, and he was faithful to his wife throughout the duration of the show. So for that, he gets my number 4 listing. Number 3 is Cliff Huxtable, played by Bill Cosby on The Cosby Show, ran on NBC from 1984 to 1992. Now, anytime you bring The Cosby Show up, you always have to make the caveat because of what happened personally, the tragedy that happened, and the choices that Bill Cosby himself made and what he's suffering right now. I am not interested in that. I'm talking about when I grew up and the experience that I had watching him as a TV father. So I know that there are problems with him in his personal life. And anytime you bring somebody like this up, you have to ask yourself, oh gosh, are people going to freak out when I bring this guy up? But I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the character. Okay, so that's why I'm bringing this up with that caveat. The character, Cliff Huxtable. The Huxtables seem to be, given all that aside, the Huxtables as a TV family, as I was growing up, seem to be the quintessential family that had it all together. As I said in the previous episode on Top 5 TV Mothers, they seem to know exactly what to do as parents, and the lines seem to be clear and drawn, and you knew when you crossed them you were in trouble, and they tended to have it all together. Cliff seemed to be a very good father who struck that balance between the loving father and the disciplinarian. He had that together, the loving father and the disciplinarian together in one person, and the provider as well. He was a doctor on the show. He delivered babies, and so he had that whole hero aspect going for him, but he always had time for his family. And again, you felt loved in the family, but you could feel that love coming through in the family, but you could also feel that sense of boundaries. And whenever a situation came up where a child was messing up or did something wrong, there wasn't oh my gosh, what should I do? There was always a sense of, I know exactly what to do, and here's how we're going to solve this problem, and here's how we're going to take this kid who's not on track and put him on track the right way. And he seemed to address those issues with an amount of clarity that is expressed in that program that really wasn't expressed, I think, in other programs. Number 2 is Jason Seaver, played by Alan Thicke on Growing Pains. Now, unfortunately, we lost Alan Thicke a few years back, but Growing Pains still lives on. It ran from 1985 to 1992 on ABC, and he gets my number 2 pick. Now, why does he get my number 2 pick? Well, there are a few different reasons. I felt like I related to him more like if there was a father out there who I felt mentored me over the television, he was certainly near the top of my list. In the show, he was a psychologist, and some of that psychology bled through in how he handled his kids. And the other reason why I pick him at the number 2 spot was the fact that I identify, out of all the TV children that are out there, I probably, thinking about it off the top of my head, most identify with Kirk Cameron's character, Mike Seaver, because he was kind of a mess up, didn't do well in school, skipped school, cheated, and the lessons that he learned from his father were really personable to me. because I was going through some of those same kind of lessons as a kid. I wasn't the overachiever that Alex was in Family Ties. I was certainly the underachiever and snarky but very smart kid that Mike Seaver was, and Jason's relationship with him and the things he taught seemed to just resonate with me pretty personally, so he does get my number 2 position. All right, so number 1, you may have guessed this already because I have said over and over again, I am a huge fan of Family Ties. Family Ties, the father in Family Ties comes in at our number 1 position, Stephen Keaton, played by Michael Gross. Family Ties ran from 1982 to 1989, and they are, in my opinion, all around the quintessential family. I love them. Now, why does Stephen Keaton edge out over everybody else? Well, again, there's the idea that you had it all together seemed to be one of those things in television that was a little bit artificial. You want it to be artificial because you want the mentorship from the television program for sure to come through. And people who were making television shows, as I've talked about before on the channel, were very interested in solving issues and talking about issues of illiteracy, issues of domestic violence, all those kind of issues. And in a lot of these other places, with the exception of maybe the Bundys, which was again the anti-family values show, but in all these other ones, there seemed to be this clarity that came through with the parents on the television program that was a tad bit, in my opinion, artificial, but not with Stephen Keaton and not with Elise Keaton. Stephen Keaton seemed to be learning as the situation came up. He didn't always know the exact right thing to do. He had to kind of figure it out, and that seemed to be more genuine as problems in the show arose, as different plots developed. So as the plots developed that, for example, that his brother was an alcoholic, it wasn't like, oh, I know exactly what to do for alcoholics. Here's this. It was just like, I don't know how to interact. Are you sure he's like this? There seemed to be this question about it. And as situations arose where Mallory was dating Nick, who he didn't get along with, he didn't have the perfect answer as a father. And so there was a sense of, and he had to learn what to do and how to interact with Nick as a father and not want to jump all over Mallory and her relationship and violate her trust and those kind of things. So there seemed to be this genuineness that came through, but the genuineness that always kind of ended up at the end of the show, of course, being on the right side and being the correct thing to do, which I just felt was more honest in television. So those are my top 5. What are your top 5? Please leave them in the comments below. Was there somebody I missed? Was there somebody I should have said? Please leave it in the comments below. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share this on your favorite social media. Again, if you want to take that one extra step, you can find in the description below, buy me a coffee. And I am still wondering whether or not I should change this to Some Cereal for Dinner podcast to just Retro Cereal and Retro Cereal podcast. Anything that you could say about that would truly help me out. Any opinion, any feedback that you would have on that would be helpful to me. So thanks a lot, and we will talk to you again on another episode of, for now, Some Cereal for Dinner podcast.